Awesome! Alright, now we're getting to one of my personal favorite parts of this because I think it's just such a critical foundational key to really attracting others, and it makes it so much easier because instead of going out there and trying to pull people towards you, what this concept does is it makes people kind of naturally want to come towards you. It's like you're sort of a vortex in an ocean, and you're just naturally sucking in quality friends, be it like fish or whatever, but they're sort of getting sucked into your personal sphere of influence, which is a really powerful way to actually go and then create a very strong knit close group of friends around you, which is really cool. So it's a drop of honey. So let's go over to the computer and let's make it happen. He starts off talking about Woodrow Wilson, and it was interesting because Woodrow Wilson was really upset in this one scene. It was with this council, and it was just a difficult time for him. And he was mad at people, but he realized that if he wanted to have a big impact, or if he wanted to stay popular with others, even though he was a little bit upset, he had to agree with others. He had to get along, and he had to have these two really powerful traits. He had to have radical candor, and the desire to get together, the desire to agree. Because as soon as you have these two foundational traits and you're like going along to get along and agree with people, all of a sudden it becomes much more difficult for them to be upset with you. It becomes a lot easier to actually have that personal connection, have that foundational core connection with people, because they actually care and they want to be with you. And what's cool is, during Rockefeller's kind of time period in 1915, he was one of the most fiercely despised people in Colorado. And one of the time he had this huge factory, right, and he had this massive strike. It was one of the bloodiest strikes in American industry ever, and it shut out the state for 2 years. And array miners, they were just so upset, demanding massive increases in wages and just asking for better conditions, better pay, just more from their career. And blood had been shed. Strikers had been shot. Bodies were riddled with bullets. I read this and I was like, holy crap. As you think about like the situation, right, where you're just trying to go to work, and these guys, they just want a little bit more pay, and they're literally being shot, and people are dying. It's just a very difficult to picture situation looking back at it today. I think that people would literally be killed for demanding higher wages. It's a very gruesome situation. And at the time, Rockefeller, he wanted to win the strikers over to his way of thinking, and the way he did it is so powerful, so foundational. It shows this concept very well. So after spending weeks making friends with the strikers, Rockefeller would go out, he would go past the strikers, and he would try to make friends with the strikers, and he would try to understand where they're actually coming from, and talk to them, make connections with, win them over as friends. And so he goes to address these representatives of the strikers, and he makes this huge speech. It is a masterpiece, and it produced astonishing results because it calmed the waves of hate that threatened to destroy this factory. And it won him a host of admirers. It won him admirers because he praised them and presented facts in such a friendly manner that the strikers went back to work without saying another word about an increase in wages, for which they fought so violently. He did this by connecting with them, by being positive, not by attacking them. The opening of his speech is so powerful, and it glows with friendliness. Now I want you to remember, as we sort of read this, that a few days previously he wanted to hang these men by the neck to a sour apple tree, and they wanted to hang him by the neck to a sour apple. But he looked past that. He looked past he's different, and he couldn't have been more gracious, more friendly if he addressed a group of medical missionaries. It was his entire goal to radiate, like, phrases such as, here are some really good keywords that you can use, and these are ones that he used. He used words like proud. He used words that showed praise. He used words that showed that he actually cared about the striker. And he talks about how he's proud to be there, and after having visited the homes of the workers, visiting your homes, caring about them and what they're passionate about, and meeting many of your wives and children. He says, we meet here not as strangers, but as friends. And he says that these people who are rioting against him are actually meeting in a spirit of mutual friendship, and their common interests are only granted by their curiosity and their courtesy to be there. and that he is there as well. It says this is a red letter day of his life, and it's the first time he ever had the good fortune to meet the representatives of the employees of his great company. It's the officers and superintendents, together, and he can assure that he is proud to be here, and he will remember the gathering as long as he lives. Notice here how he is grateful for the opportunity to speak with these individuals, and he's showing that he is thankful for them coming together to have this big strike. Now, in his mind, do you think he really wants to wake up one day and say, oh, awesome, 700 people at my factory are on a strike? Of course not, right? But he takes it and he puts a little twist on it. He puts a grateful, thankful twist on it. And he changes his perception, because honestly, you can turn any situation that you have into anything that you want just by simply changing how you perceive it. That's exactly what he does here. He changes his perception. He says, this is a great thing. I'm so happy it's happening. I'm very thankful that you're here. Really appreciate it. He makes a mental shift, and that mental shift leads to a physical shift in the way that these workers actually perceive him and perceived his speech and care, and they came back to work after this, right? He says he will remember this gathering for as long as he lives because he cares about them. He says, had this meeting been 2 weeks ago, I should have stood here as a stranger to most of you, recognize a few faces. But having the opportunity in the last week to invest his own valuable time visiting all the camps of the southern coal field, talking individually with practically all of the representatives except for those who are away, having visited in their home, having met your wives and children. We meet here not as strangers, but as friends. And it is in that spirit of mutual friendship that I'm glad to have this opportunity to discuss with you our common. Notice how he doesn't put, like, literally, I don't see the word mine here, referencing himself maybe more than once or twice. His entire focus, everything he talks about is focused on the most powerful word that you can have when talking to other people, and that word is you. He's focusing on you. He's focusing on your things, you know? He's caring about what they care about. He's caring about when he says common interest here, I think that's the closest that he gets to actually talking about any kind of benefit that he has, as these guys obviously know that he doesn't want to pay as much money to the workers, right? He says that since this is a meeting of the officers of the company and the representatives of the employees, it is only by your courtesy that I am here, for I am not so fortunate as to be either one or the other. Yet I feel that I am intimately associated with you men, because obviously he owns the whole company, and for, in a sense, represent both the stockholders and the directors, because he's the freaking owner of the company. I mean, it's not that tough. But isn't this just a superb example of the fine art of making friends out of enemies? He literally turned people that wanted to strangle him into friends by focusing on them, by caring about them, by putting all the attention on them. And notice again this idea of adding value to other people's lives without necessarily actually paying them money. These guys went back to work without a pay increase because he added so much value to their life just by paying attention to them. You look at companies, you'll have companies that can literally pay the same employee 75% of what another company will pay, maybe 60% of what another company will pay, and yet the client or the employee will want to work there. Why? Because of the value added from the experience, from the social environment, from the additional benefits that they get as a person in an environment where they feel significant. They feel like there's been a significant amount of value added to their life to make them feel like a more important person. They would, like so many people, would rather work in careers where they have a feeling of significance than in careers where they can make twice as much but feel like crap. That's the critical key. You can add so much value into the lives of those around you. Like, think about applying this concept. Like, if this guy, if Rockefeller can literally save probably the equivalent of hundreds of millions of dollars today by just spending 2 weeks speaking with these guys and listening to them, listening to their stories, and going to their families' homes and listening to their families. Imagine how much value you can add to someone else's life by spending 2 weeks actually caring about them and only them, because this guy was looking at hundreds of people, and that was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So if you can just spend a ridiculous amount of time in front of the right people, giving the right amount of value to their life, that can have a humongous impact